Has anyone ever had sleep paralysis before? I tell you, it's one of the strangest, most fascinating, yet horrifying things that you could experience. It's the feeling of being unable to move upon awakening. Your senses and awareness are intact, but you still feel as though you're in this half-asleep, half-awake state. I'd heard stories of this long before it happened to me. I've only experienced it once. I was in college. I was going through an incredibly tough time in my life. I was insanely stressed during finals week. I wasn't getting much sleep. It must have been the night before my last final. I went to bed late because I stayed up all night studying for bio. I don't remember at what point I decided to finally call it. I just remember it all becoming a blur, then blackness. Next thing I remember, I was in my room, in my bed, but there was this weird haziness in my awareness. Like I was awake, but I felt weaker. And when I tried to move, I couldn't. I could only move my eyes to look around the dark room. At one point, when I guess I was looking to one side of the room, I looked back to the center, and there was this woman standing dead center in the room, facing the bed. She was wearing this black dress and holding some long object. I wanted to call out, "Mom?" but my paralysis prevented it. I couldn't say anything. The woman came closer to me until she knelt down and touched my forehead, and I could feel it. She got eye to eye with me, and I could see my mother's face. I tried to say "Mom" again, desperately, but I was stuck in my own body. She stood back up and walked to the doorway before disappearing into the house. I lay there, unable to move, maybe another 10 to 20 seconds before my vision suddenly became more clear, and I was able to think more clearly as well. I was able to sit up. I jumped out of the bed, screaming "Mom" over and over. I ran to the bedroom hallway, yelling her name. A door opened down the hall, and someone came to hug me. But it wasn't my mom. It was my dad, telling me he misses her too. My mom died 3 weeks before this happened. You know what I love about dreams? How vague and how bizarre they can be. You feel like you're in this separate world where things can just make no sense. Now what about when that unearthliness transcends into the quote-unquote real world? You'll see what I mean in a minute. I was in REM sleep having this bizarre nightmare about being followed by some weird creature in the middle of the woods. The dream became fuzzy though, and I kind of woke up from it. I say kind of, because while I was out of the dream and back in my bed, I couldn't move a muscle in my body. I started hearing this faint, weird noise. It was this indescribable, robotic, yet alive type sound. It started light and soft, but it repeated every 3 seconds. I noticed it was getting slightly louder every time. I felt like the sound was getting closer. It got so unbearably loud in my head, I just wanted to scream, but I couldn't. Then my eyes locked onto the closet door, specifically the crack in the closet door, which I never leave open ever. There was this distorted face of a man looking between the crack, with this unhumanly large open-mouthed smile, and every time I heard the noise, it seemed as if the closet and the face were getting closer, until the closet door slammed shut, and everything went silent. I regained control of my body shortly after that, and the first thing I did, even though I was 24 years old, was run to my parents' room to get my dad to check the closet with me. There was nothing in the closet though, or the rest of my room. My dad seemed pretty confident that what I just experienced was sleep paralysis, and that he had experienced it once as well. Didn't make me feel any less disturbed about what I just went through. Many years ago, I had a sleep paralysis experience. I knew there was a thing in my closet, something really evil, but I also knew I was dreaming and I should face my fear. I tried not to look directly at the closet door, but if I moved my eyes, my head would turn away. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't look directly at it. Then I woke up in a cold sweat. At first I felt really relieved that it was over, but very shortly I realized it wasn't a dream, and there was really something in the closet. I was laying on my back and couldn't move, and I didn't really hear it, but I could kind of feel the sickening laughter wash over me in waves, emanating from the closet. All of a sudden, the thing throws a human head at me, and it lands on my chest face up. It was this girl I knew in high school. Up to this point, I was kind of holding it together, terrified but not panicked. Well, I lose it now. I can't even scream. All I could do is make these grunting sounds and moaning noises. I'm wriggling and straining, trying to rock from side to side to get it off me, but I can't move. This seemed to last maybe another minute or two, and then I really woke up. It was so traumatic that for weeks I would be scared when I woke up that I wasn't actually awake and something horrible could happen at any second. It still makes my skin crawl when I think about that laugh. The thing is, I never heard of sleep paralysis or night terrors at that point in my life. I thought I was losing my mind. I've suffered sleep paralysis a total of 3 times in my life. The first 2 times, it just consisted of me waking up not being able to move my body. The third time was much different though. I had woken up very early morning, probably like between 5 and 6 a.m., when the sun was just starting to come up. There was light in the room, but barely any. I tried to move, but I had that unfortunately familiar feeling of paralysis, helplessness. My eyes fixated on the wall. There was nothing I could do. Then, suddenly, I heard heavy footsteps coming up the stairs of my bedroom. It was my brother, followed by my sister, dad, and mom. They were all sobbing hysterically, and they all seemed to be at least a foot taller. It was unnerving. The 4 of them approached my bed, then stopped at the bedside, towering over me, all 4 of them crying. I couldn't move. I wanted to cry for help or just yell at them to stop because they were scaring me. Their heights, they looked like they were near to hitting the ceiling. Then, just as quickly as they entered, all 4 of them turned and walked back down the stairs. I could move again, and so I ran down the stairs to follow them, but they weren't in the outside area. I went to each of their rooms one at a time. All 4 of them were fast asleep. My heart was racing because the most surreal, unnerving thing just happened to me. I had to lean on the wall to gather my thoughts for a second, breathing heavily. Falling back asleep was futile the rest of the night. I lay awake until the sun was fully up. A few days later, I was struck by a speeding car when crossing the road with friends and ended up with 3 broken bones and a fractured thigh bone. I was hospitalized for a week, and at one point, all 4 of my family members stood next to my hospital bed, looking down at me, my mom being emotional and crying. It was almost the same image from my sleep paralysis. I'm not superstitious at all, but if I were, I would 100% believe that dream was some kind of sign, or some kind of prediction of the future. In fact, I just got chills writing that last sentence, thinking about it. There was this one time I was out late drinking with friends. It was some point in the summer of 2016. We were kind of just walking around town and then around the neighborhood when one of my friends spotted someone hiding in a bush. He pointed and said, "Look," and we all walked a little closer to get a better look. We could see what he was talking about, but just barely. It was bizarre, like someone hiding in this bush in front of this house. When we got too close, apparently, this weird, off-putting sound started coming from the bush. So we all screamed and laughed and ran away. We screamed because it was scary, but laughed because at the same time it was bizarrely funny, and there were a lot of us, so... Anyway, we walked back to our houses respectively, assuming whoever was in that bush was just messing with people. I fell asleep pretty easily that night since I was drunk, but next thing I remember was waking up to the near pitch blackness of my room. I couldn't look at the clock to see what time it was because I literally couldn't move. I was in a sleep paralysis state. I looked around the room with my eyes only and started to hear a familiar noise, the noise we heard coming from that bush. Then I looked straight in front of me, at the foot of my bed, and what I saw was pure nightmare fuel. It was what appeared to be this floating, grotesque, horrific head of a demonic ghost-like thing. As it got closer to me, I realized it wasn't floating. There was a body, but its body blended in with the blackness of the room. Its mouth hung open, and it just kept making the familiar noise from the bush. It got mere inches from my face before it suddenly just faded away, and I was able to let out a scream and move my body. I sat in my bed, panting and heart racing. I flicked on the lamp and checked around my bed, but that demonic thing was gone. What I just experienced seemed so real, like I was awake for it. It wasn't a dream. I told my parents about it the next day, and they agreed with me that it was sleep paralysis, though they had never heard of anyone seeing freaky shit like that before. I live in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. It was a Tuesday night. I was laying on my bed trying to get some sleep. I laid there for about 3 hours until I decided to get up and take a walk around my neighborhood just to clear my head. It was 2 in the morning. I was walking down the street when I remembered there's an abandoned building in our neighborhood. I decided to visit it. People say that this building is haunted, and I've always wanted to see what's inside of it. The building itself looked really creepy. Broken windows, a huge metal door which said no entry with red paint. As an 18-year-old college student, I wanted to be adventurous. I climbed through one of the broken windows and got inside the building. I took out my phone and started to record so I could show off in front of my friends. Just to let you guys know, my phone works completely fine. There's no problem with it. The place was really dark. The only source of light in that building was from my phone. It took me a couple of seconds to realize I was inside a small room. I walked out the door into the hallway. It was an apartment. I was doing commentary while recording to make it look cool. I got out of the apartment and into the main hall of the building. Here's a picture of the main hall. On the left side of the elevator, there's a small passageway which leads to a really small room under the stairs, as seen in this picture. I went there to investigate. When I got close to the room, I heard a clicking noise from the first door. I was frozen for a split second. I walked back to the main hall still recording. Then I heard a loud sound of metal dropping on concrete. I almost crapped my pants. I wanted to get the hell out of there, but something inside me told me to go upstairs and find out what it was. I started walking up the stairs as slowly as I could. I don't even know what I was expecting to see up there. I got to the first floor. As usual, it was dark, but it got colder. This event took place in the middle of August, so it was hot outside. I'm into paranormal stuff, and when I suddenly felt cold, I firmly believed something was going on here. I should have turned back, but I still wanted to see where that sound came from. There were 4 apartments on each floor. I investigated all 4 of them and saw nothing. A chill ran down my spine when I realized the whole second floor and the ground floor were covered in sand. There was no concrete and no sign of anything metal. The cold temperature on the floor and the fact that I was alone gave me the chills. I hurried down the stairs, made my way back to the apartment, climbed out through the window, and ran back to my home. When I got home, I drank gallons of water, calmed myself down, and took out my phone. I wanted to hear that sound again, so I played the video, and to my horror, the audio on the video was messed up. My commentary wasn't there at all. Like I said earlier, there's no problem with my phone. It works fine. I didn't get any sleep that night. I told my friends about it, and they told me that it was really stupid to go inside that building alone. I didn't delete the video. I decided to keep it as a memory. Fast forward to December. I was going through my gallery, and I came across that video. I decided to play it. I fast forwarded to the part where I heard the sound, and surprisingly, that sound is clearly heard in the video. I don't know how it could be heard clearly, but here's a small clip from the video. I got goosebumps and closed my phone. I promised myself not to go near that building ever again. Let me start out by saying I was a non-believer of the paranormal until this night. I was with 4 buddies. I won't list any names for safety reasons. We went to hang out and talk in an old, supposedly haunted trailer late at night. The owner and multiple people who lived there all told me that it was haunted by demons, and me being the new guy to the group, I needed to be initiated. This initiation consisted of walking into the haunted back room. I did as they said after they convinced me, and walked in and then quickly ran out. My friends thought it was hilarious and went to prove to me that it was all not real. I went behind them to record them and see if we could get any proof of the demon. My friend went to open the closet, and that's when I got spooked by a loud audible crash in the closet and ran away. My friend thought it was hilarious, and after more convincing, dragged me back inside the house to record him. My buddy and I got outside of the trailer to rewatch our footage, and what we caught scared me beyond belief.
Dude, I just heard shit in the closet. Yo, bro. Oh, fuck! Hey. Oh. What the fuck? Oh, shit! Oh, fuck me, fuck. Fuck! Look at this fucking video! Chase, look at this!
Dude, I saw it.
Fuck me, fuck!
Get the hell out of there, dude!
The closet opening and closing, loud knocking and windows being tapped on. All the while I captured orbs outside of the room. While I was outside waiting for my friend to come back out, I heard the trash cans rattle and immediately called my friends out. We didn't see them move, but a little later on we had things thrown at us from an unknown place. I had a live bullet tossed into my leg, and one more land inches away from my buddy's leg.
I have it on video. You were making that shit. Wait, if you're there, then who's throwing shit?
Huh? I just came back from smoking with Roy.
Yeah. Oh, shit.
They just passed by, I took a hit, and they kept walking.
We have actual fucking proof of that ghost.
Eventually we went to get out after I practically dragged my friend into the car, only to have our car alarm go off as we opened the car door. When we got home, my buddy showered and said his back hurt, and when I checked, I saw he had multiple scratches up and down his back, as you can see in this image. It was a normal evening. My best friend and I decided to go for a walk. It was around 10 o'clock in the evening, so it was as dark out as it was going to get. I live in a small village, so we usually just walk around the streets. There weren't many people out at this hour. We were kind of just walking and talking. A little while into our walk, we started to head home. We went up some hill, which led to the little town area and the only store we had in our village. But as soon as we came up the hill, we saw a weird-looking figure in the distance. It looked like an abnormally tall woman covered in a sheet of some sort, and it had its neck tied with a string or a rope. This is the video we took of the figure. Honestly, it reminded us of the movie The Nun. It was really hard to see since it was totally dark and the streetlights weren't exactly the brightest. It was moving very slowly, and it was waddling left and right like it was drunk or injured or something. We couldn't figure out if it was walking our way or not because it was moving so slowly. It was a really disturbing sight at that moment, at that hour of the night. After half a minute of standing there, we realized it was walking towards us. We ran as fast as we could when we realized it didn't even have a visible face or just anything to take note of specifically. We walked around to go home, hoping we wouldn't see her again, but we thought we would, because if we calculated it right, we would meet again on one intersecting street, but luckily we didn't. The next day I told my friend about what happened, and she told me she also saw her, or it, while she was driving with her sister past the bar, which is on the street we thought we would see her again. She moved slower than us, and I really don't know how we missed her, but luckily we did. My friend described the figure just as horrifically as it appeared from the distance to us that night, and since that night, we never saw her again. This just happened a couple days ago. This isn't something that happened to me, but rather something that happened to a family friend. Our family friend, who I'll call Buddy for the sake of this video, believes that something has attached itself to him, something paranormal. It started when he moved into a new house. Almost right away, Buddy and his family started experiencing paranormal activity, such as shadows and voices. One night, Buddy had found a weird discovery in the basement of his new home. Upon doing some moving in the basement, he found something that he had not seen prior to the move-in. He found a stolen cemetery wreath. This made partial sense because the town cemetery was in walking distance of the house. Buddy was aggravated with the activity going on in his new home, so out of anger, he snapped the cemetery wreath, and in his own words, "When I snapped the wreath, every dog in that town started howling. There must have been 20 dogs all howling at the same time. I was scared to death." After that, the activity worsened, and they had no choice but to move. But it seemed the activity followed them to every house they went to. Recently, they've had some of the worst experiences in this apartment they currently live in. Buddy and his wife, who I'll call Pam, have been repeatedly followed by some kind of entity. They decided to set up a phone recording for the night and try to capture anything that might seem paranormal as evidence that they weren't crazy. What Buddy found on the phone was horrifying. He woke up at 3 to review some footage and found a 5-second video that had been taken after the previous recording had stopped. Keep in mind, they have no pets, no children that live with them, no TV or radio was on at the time, and both Buddy and Pam were in bed when this happened. You can clearly see something pick up the phone and a female voice speak into it. I can assure you that is not Pam's voice or any other voice that they're familiar with. Everyone thinks it says, "Did you tell Daddy to rape me?" But you guys take a listen for yourself and come to your own conclusion.
You told Daddy you raped me?
Almost a night after this recording, one of Buddy and Pam's daughters died from an overdose. She was 30 years old and 7 months pregnant and a mother of 4, getting ready to be 5. Could this video have something to do with it? We don't know. But if it is a coincidence, then it sure is one hell of a scary one. I'm very anti-dating apps, but I guess I'm biased because of the nightmarish experience I had with Tinder. I've only met up with 3 people ever off Tinder. The first 2 experiences were nothing special. I wasn't excited about either of the girls, and there were no second dates. But compared to the third meetup, oh boy, in comparison the first 2 went phenomenally. I matched this brunette girl named Annette. She had up 4 pictures, 3 of which she was posing alone in what looked like her backyard. The 4th one was in front of a pond. At the time, I didn't see it as a red flag that she was alone in all of her pictures. Honestly, why would I? But she was decently attractive, at least in my standards. So I talked to her, and it got to the point where she asked what I was doing that night. And when I said nothing, she asked if she could come over and hang out. Considering my bedroom in my parents' house is in the basement with a separate entrance, it would work out rather nicely. We set a time for her to come over. When the time came, she texted me literally right on the dot that she was outside. Punctual, to say the least. I let her in the side basement door entrance, and we walked downstairs. I tried to make the greeting not awkward, but right off the bat, first impression, she seemed weird. Her responses were short, her laugh was weird. When we sat down on my bed and I asked her how long the drive was, she laughed, like she didn't even answer my question. She just laughed like I told a joke. And as she laughed, she looked right at me, her eyes still open wide. It was uncomfortable, and I already knew I wasn't going to vibe with this girl. I wanted her out ASAP. I turned the TV on in the background for filler, and I pretended to be laughing at the TV because of the constant awkward silences, and she never once batted an eye to look at the TV. She just watched me the whole time. I was able to wrap it up quickly by pretending I got a text about going into work early the next day. and I implied I needed to go to sleep. She seemed like she didn't want to leave. It was extremely awkward. But I managed to get her to follow me out the basement door. When she was finally gone, I had to ask myself, what did I just put myself through? Not even 5 minutes after she left, she texted me, "Are you sure you have to go to bed? I was having fun." I read the text and sighed. I threw my phone on the bed to charge while I went to get food upstairs. When I got back, I had 3 more texts from her, 2 being question marks, the last one being hello with more question marks. This girl was clearly nuts, so I blocked her. Done and done. I went to bed an hour later. I woke in the middle of the night, like I often do. I'm a light sleeper, it's really annoying. Waking up randomly isn't weird for me. I instinctively felt around for my phone to check what time it was, but my phone wasn't by its normal spot on the ledge charging, and I 100% remembered putting it there. So I got up and started looking around for my phone. I turned on the bedside strip of red LED lights I had hung on the wall to light up the room just a bit. I couldn't find it though, and I'm kind of the person who will let that bother me until I find it. I went upstairs to grab the landline phone and bring it down so I could call my number. When I dialed my number, I heard it ringing from inside the boiler/laundry room, which was connected to my room. I entered the boiler room, and there was my phone left on the washer machine, causing the entire machine to vibrate as it rang. I knew this was bizarre because I didn't do laundry that night. I didn't even remember going in there. I picked up my phone to see a bunch of new messages from some random number. I opened the texts to see 2 pictures of me sleeping. Above the pictures were 2 texts saying, "Nice, good job blocking me." The second one saying, "Lock your door next time." And I realized what an idiot I was, that I was so anxious to get her out of my room that I didn't even lock the door when she left. Then I can't say for certain, but I felt like I wasn't alone in the room. Like I just felt another presence, and I had a feeling that she may have been hiding behind the cylinder boiler in the darkest corner of the room. But I didn't go look. I went upstairs to get my parents and call the police. Given that the girl was dumb enough, or crazy enough, to leave a digital footprint, tracking her and getting charges pressed on her was easy. Her name wasn't even Annette. Her real name was Sylvana. Her charges were a breaking and entering charge and a stalking and harassment charge. I of course got a restraining order, and I've never heard from that girl again. I've tried all the major dating apps, and I never really have much luck on them. My friend told me he was having luck on this app, Hot or Not, so I gave it a try. And right off the bat, I was getting a lot more likes, albeit from girls I didn't really find attractive at all. Still, on my first batch of free swipes, I matched this one cute blonde girl named Julia. I'll spare the details of our conversation, but it went excitingly well. It was one of those rare matches where the girl was attractive and very receptive to my messages, seeming like she was actually enjoying talking to me. We quickly moved to Snapchat. I asked her for her number, but she said let's talk on Snapchat instead. I was fine with that. I added her on Snap and she added me back. Her Snap score was low, like under 1,000, so right away I was suspicious and upset that this may have been too good to be true like I thought. She messaged me, and I messaged back being blunt, asking her to snap a selfie of herself just for my safety. I told her there's a lot of catfish profiles going around, so I can't be too careful. She opened the message right away, but didn't reply for a minute. I thought for sure the account was going to block me any second. But instead, to my surprise, I got a notification that I got a snap from Julia. I opened the snap, and it was the same blonde-haired girl from the pictures. Still, I wasn't convinced, so I asked her to give me a thumbs up or a peace sign. She opened the chat. I was waiting to see if she'd block me this time. She didn't respond for a couple minutes, until finally, she sent another snap. I opened it, and it was half her face smiling, holding up a peace sign. That was enough for me. I snapped her back, and then we messaged for a little while. We eventually made plans to hang out. She invited me over to her house, which was across town, not too far away. She said she was home alone and that it wouldn't be a problem. She gave me an exact address. I noticed she had her Snap map on, so I did a little check to make sure her address matched her Snap location, and it seemed to check out. I told her I'd be over in a few. I changed into decent clothes, sprayed on some cologne, combed my hair, and got in my car to head over. I remember thinking I may have overdid it with the cologne. She snapped me while I was driving, asking if I was on the way. I told her yes. She read it immediately but didn't respond. I got to the house. It had the number 22 written clear as day next to the door. I messaged her that I'm here. She didn't open the snap though, so I decided to just go ring the bell. There were no cars in the driveway, and the grass seemed like it hadn't been cut in a few weeks. I rang the bell, but she didn't answer, so I started knocking really loud. When she still didn't answer, I went back to Snap and tried calling her using that. It just kept ringing though, she didn't answer. Was I just pranked? I suddenly heard a woman's voice yelling something at me across the street. For some reason, I imagined it to be Julia at first, till I realized it was an older woman yelling, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" I began walking back to the street and called back, "I'm meeting someone." She said back to me at a lower volume now that we were closer that I have the wrong house, nobody lives there. I asked the address of the house, and the address she told me matched the address this Julia girl gave me. I thanked her and got in my car. I went to try to message Julia one more time, but she blocked me. I felt like I was played for a fool. They unmatched me on Hot or Not too. Luckily, I took screenshots of the profile before that, because I sent some to one of my friends before driving to the house. When I got home, I sent screenshots to my friend group chat with like 8 other people, asking if anyone knew her. One guy, my friend Darren, said that's Lisa, a girl who overdosed on heroin 2 years back. When he said that, another friend in the group chat confirmed he was right. I got goosebumps because the snaps I got were from a girl who matched that Lisa girl completely. I told my friends, and they thought either I was crazy or the situation was crazy. I'm without a doubt certain the girl in those snaps was Lisa. How this happened, I have no earthly idea. Better question, why was I led to that house? I can't even try to imagine. In high school, I was in a big graduating class, so for that reason, I didn't get to know a lot of my classmates on a personal level. Using dating apps in college, though, I was able to match and kind of connect with a lot of the girls I'd never really spoken to back in high school. I was using my app of choice when I matched this girl, Maria. She was in my grade in high school. I followed her on Instagram and Snap already, but I never really got to know her in high school. I sent her the first message and asked her how she'd been. I talked to her about high school a lot, and how it was funny that we never really spoke or had any classes together. She said we should hang out that night. I asked if she'd want to meet somewhere for drinks or food, but she said she's down to just come hang at my place if that's cool. Honestly, I like that idea even better. I told her sure. She asked if my parents were home. I told her no, only my sister. Then I gave her my address. She said she'd let me know when she's on her way. Then it was just a waiting game. I waited and waited for the notification saying Maria sent you a new message. In fact, it was going on past an hour. I sent a follow-up message on Tinder, but she didn't reply. A few minutes later, I checked her Instagram page and saw she posted a story a few minutes ago. It was a meme. Was she ignoring me now? I checked her Snap story, which was posted within half an hour, and she was apparently with her friend, another girl from our high school. I didn't understand. Was she coming or not? I commented on her story, "Are you still coming later?" She opened it a few minutes later and replied saying, "What are you talking about?" I repeated the question, then added a reference to the conversation on the app. She replied, "I don't have that app. Send me the profile." So I did, and she told me right away it was a catfish and to report it. I did so, and I think Tinder automatically unmatched the profile after that. But I wasn't concerned about someone using this girl's pictures. I was concerned someone had my address and knew my parents weren't home. I made sure every door was locked. I truly was expecting something to happen that night, but it was getting pretty late, and I was starting to feel a little more relaxed. When my guard was down, that's when it happened. A horrific scream from my little sister's room. I jumped off the couch to go run to her room. She opened the door just as I made it to the room, and we met at the doorway. She had this horrified look on her face, like she just saw a demon. She screamed that there's someone outside her window. I couldn't believe it. She ran upstairs while I went to her window to confirm it. There was no one out there now, but I knew it wasn't a coincidence. I tried to call my parents, but I couldn't get a hold of either of them. My sister slept in my room with me that night because she was scared. I only went to bed after waiting downstairs for an hour, listening for anything possible. When I was finally in bed, that was when I heard a noise. My sister heard it too, because we both sat up at the exact same time. Our parents weren't supposed to be back that night. I went to lock the bedroom door and then got 911 on the phone. I whispered into the phone that I was certain we were currently the victims of a break-in. I told my sister to be quiet when she started making crying noises. Footsteps approached the door. Then someone tried twisting the doorknob. Then they started banging on the door. And in a deep, angry-sounding voice, a man said, "I know you're in there. I can smell you." The 911 operator heard it, and she told me to hide in the closet with my sister. I waved my sister over to the closet, and she came. We sat in there quietly the best we could, but he kept banging and banging on the door, and my sister cracked. She cried out, "The police are coming, leave us alone." The banging stopped. We heard the man laugh. Then there was silence. Next thing we knew, the police were outside, and the operator told me to quickly get to the front door if the coast was clear to let the police in. The police then did a thorough investigation of the house, which was clear. The entry and exit point was my parents' bedroom window, which he climbed through off the backyard awning. My little sister screaming about the police must have scared him off. The police recommended we sleep somewhere else, so we went to my friend Joe's house. Ever since then, I always verify whoever I'm talking to from online is actually who they say they are.
They say
Remember Chuck E. Cheese? That old arcade with the singing animatronics? Of course you do. I just found out they went bankrupt recently. It made me think back to my horrible experience there as a very little kid. I was no older than 8 or 9. It was like my third and last time ever at a Chuck E. Cheese. This specific location closed down years ago, but it used to be basically down the street from our old house. My mom took my little brother and I, and she let us roam free and do our own thing and play the games, while she sat at one of the tables reading like most of the other parents. I was playing this clown game where you had to shoot the clown's teeth out with this little cannonball shooter. I was playing the games that would get me the most tickets for the prizes. I finished the game again, and the tickets shot out from the ticket slot. That's when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned and jumped in my seat. I was greeted with a giant Chuck E. Cheese mascot in my face. He held out his hand for a high five, and naturally I gave him his high five with a smile. He then pointed at the tickets and gave me a thumbs up. I think I just continued laughing and smiling and said, "Yeah." Then he pointed at the tickets once more and motioned for me to follow him. So I ripped the tickets from the slot and followed the giant mascot. As we walked across the main floor, a couple other kids around like 6 came up to him saying, "Hey Chucky," and he gave them both high fives. I kept following him, wondering if he'd tell the other kids to follow, but he didn't. He would turn back every few seconds to make sure I was still following. Finally, we made it across the main floor by the stage towards this back area, where he waved me to follow him through this employees-only door. From what I remember about how I was feeling, let's just say a combination of weird and excited. We entered this narrow hallway, and I felt kind of special for being allowed access back here. Keep in mind, I had the mind and maturity of a very young child. The mascot led me to this back room, where he motioned for me to enter first, so I did. It was this small changing room type of room. It had a few lockers on one wall, and one long bench extending half the length of the room. That was it. He entered the room and shut the door behind us, and I noticed he locked it. That's when I became confused and afraid. I thought he was taking me to get a bunch of free tickets. What could he possibly do in this empty room with me? He approached me, put his furry mascot hand on my shoulder, and then started rubbing from my shoulder to my arm. Then he seemed as though he tried to reach lower with both of his hands, and I pushed him off and yelled, "Stop." That's when the person in the suit lifted the mask off his head, revealing some sweaty, middle-aged man underneath. He started to remove the rest of the costume from himself as he told me to be quiet. I sat there watching, shaking, and plotting my way for the door. When I thought he was distracted enough by the suit, I tried to run past him for the door, but he grabbed me and told me to stop. He offered me all the free tickets I wanted if I just behaved. I started to yell and pound on the door. He tried to cover my mouth, but I think he gave up when he realized it wasn't worth the risk for him. I unlocked the door and ran back down the hall in tears. I ran back to my mom, yelling at her about what just happened. She was distraught and went right to the front desk. The girl at the front desk seemed to be in a panic as well, and I think she called for her supervisor. Pretty soon, all the music was stopped and the place was put into a lockdown of sorts, where all the kids were to go to their parents. A bunch of workers ran to the back section, and eventually police showed up outside. I had to give my whole story to a crowd of like 6 people, and I was extremely nervous. The man in the Chucky suit was some random creep who snuck into the back section of the building to dress in one of the suits and apparently lure children to the back. Realizing and looking back at that now as a grown adult is disturbing and disgusting, that I was the victim of a predator. I never found out if that monster was caught. I used to work for Chuck E. Cheese very briefly when I was 21 years old. I was one of the janitors/maintenance workers. I know, not very awe-inspiring. I was broke as hell and needed money. All my job really entailed was cleaning tables and keeping the play areas generally clean. Sounds easy, but there was never really a time to just sit and take a breath. There was always something to clean or take care of. I would also be in charge of turning on and off the animatronics, opening the stage curtains, fixing busted arcade machines, and things of that nature. My shifts would always be later, from like 4 to 10 p.m. My location closed at 8 on weekdays and 9 on weekends. I would stay an hour, sometimes 2 hours after, to get the place in top shape ready for the next day. So this one night, I was working past close like I usually did. Everyone had already left the building, including the other workers, so I was the last one in the building. I was dragging my cleaning cart around the arcade area. I had already turned off all the game machines. I was by that space-themed arcade machine where you had to press the button at the right moment to stop the light on the jackpot bulb. As I was passing by this machine, the space-themed music suddenly emits from the machine at a very loud volume, and all the lights start flashing again. I felt like my heart was in my throat, that's how much it startled me. I fiddled with my keys to access the control port of the machine to turn it off again. I'd never seen anything like that happen before. It suddenly just freaked me out. Only because I was all alone in that big building pretty late at night. The weirdness didn't stop there, though. By this point in the night, I had already shut down the animatronics on the stage, so when I heard Chucky's pre-recorded laugh break the silence of the room, my heart started pounding again. The laugh was short and cut off. It almost sounded glitchy. I ditched my cleaning cart to go backstage and check on the animatronics, and I could see they were in their idle modes now, meaning they would move their limbs and heads around every so often. I would have to go to the control room to turn them off, but this was the second strange thing to happen that night. I started getting paranoid that someone else was in the building with me, but that thought was interrupted when I noticed that the Chucky animatronic was facing me, and its head angled down perfectly to look as though it was looking at me. It was bizarre. Bizarre that I was finding it that disturbing. I'm not crazy. But for my own peace of mind, with my eyes on the Chucky animatronic, I walked past it, closer to the control room. I waited there for a few seconds, and then the animatronic spun 90 degrees to face me once more, perfectly. I swear it was once again looking right at me, and then the laughter emitted once again from the animatronic. But in a creepy, glitchy, cut-off manner, this time much louder, obviously because I was right next to it. I ran to the control room to hit the switch to turn everything off on the stage once more. I left the control room, and the Chucky animatronic was still facing the direction it was moments before. I left the stage through the curtain and just felt uneasy. I was starting to think maybe it was all just getting to my head. But that's when I heard the horrible laugh again come from the stage behind the curtains. That was the last straw. I took my card, clocked out, and left. I texted my boss the next day that I had to leave early because I was feeling extremely sick. He said it wasn't a problem, but he never mentioned anything about the animatronics being left on. And when I asked him if the animatronics had some kind of motion-detecting feature to look at people, he said no, they didn't. I'm not the most superstitious guy, but I firmly believe I wasn't the only presence in that building that night. And I don't mean there was another person in there. This is a story from my childhood that I don't like to look back on too much. I was 13. My mom brought my 2 little sisters and I to Chuck E. Cheese one evening. My sisters are 4 and 6 years younger than me, so it was more for them, and my mom just wanted me to come along. My mom was playing games with my sisters, so I went to do my own thing. It was my only time ever at Chuck E. Cheese, so I was trying to play every game at least once. Eventually, a worker in a red polo shirt came up to me. He was in his lower to mid-20s, I'd say. He didn't seem that old. He asked me if I wanted some more tokens. I said, yeah, sure. He told me to follow him. He led me through this sketchy back door, which led to a back exit. I asked him where he was leading me. He said to his truck. He told me not to tell anyone, but that he had access to all the tokens he wanted and just kept piles of them in his car. I stopped following when I realized he was leading me to his car. I told him my mom would be mad. He tried to push that I follow him a little more, but gave up. Before I walked back inside, he asked for my AIM username, and I gave it to him. I was excited for new friends on AIM. For those of you who don't know, AIM was an instant messenger that was all the rage before smartphones and texting really became a thing. I don't remember his username. All I know, it was something with his name in it, which was Ben. I would sign on to AIM every single night, including that night after Chuck E. Cheese. I signed in, and I had a few friends online. Next thing I knew, I got a message from Ben, so I added him to my buddy list. He said, hey, it's Ben from earlier. I replied, what's up, and we started chatting. He chatted with me as if we were good friends already. I asked him how he was able to get all the tokens he wanted, and he said it's easy when you work there. He told me he was going to come to my house that night with a bunch of tokens. I told him, no, it's okay. And he told me, no, it's fine. You live really close to me anyway. I replied, how do you know where I live? And he said he followed my mom's van on our way home. I blocked his account immediately. I was beyond scared. I told my friends about it on AIM. Some of them said I should tell my parents or call the police. But I waited. Maybe he was bluffing. But no, he wasn't. I heard a truck pull up outside through my open window. I looked out the window and saw the black truck that Ben guy was leading me towards earlier. I saw him get out from the truck, and I know he spotted me because he started walking over to my window. I pulled the window in and locked it, and then shut the blind. By that point, he was already halfway to my window, and he was waving his arms at me. I ran to my mom to tell her. She didn't find it funny, thinking I was kidding at first. But I convinced her after she looked out the window and saw the black truck begin to speed down the road. My mom wanted me to show her the AIM conversation, but I couldn't, as I had deleted him off my buddy list and blocked him. My parents called the police, of course, but that was just for peace of mind. They couldn't do anything besides make a report. The next day, my mom called the Chuck E. Cheese and asked about a Ben. They said they had no Bens who worked there. There were also no employees matching that guy's description. The Chuck E. Cheese eventually handed the CCTV footage from the day before to the police department for an investigation, which turned up no results. My family never went to a Chuck E. Cheese ever again.
My name's Robin. I work as a wildlife photographer. My job takes me to various places, and I can hardly be in touch with my family. I grew up in Canada. My parents are still living there. I was very little when they sent me to live with my grandfather. I fell ill suddenly, and my grandpa took me over. Since then, I have never been to my childhood home. My parents often came to visit me. One summer, I decided to visit them. I took a month off from work and decided to spend some time with my parents and explore my birthplace in Canada. I called my mom and told her I'll be staying with them during this trip. My mom's voice lit up in joy. I could tell how excited she was just by her voice. I packed my bags and took a flight. My dad came to pick me up at the airport. Seeing him after a long time melted my heart. I hugged him and said, "Oh, I missed you, Dad." My dad smiled and said, "I missed you too. Now come on, let's go. Your mom is waiting. She has all of your favorite dishes cooked." We got inside the car, and the entire way we kept chatting. After 20 minutes of the drive, the car stopped in front of a tall residential building. I got down and looked at it for a while. "God, this building is still the same," I said. I was feeling nostalgic. Even though my childhood memories regarding this place are now in fragments, I was still awestruck. My dad patted my back and said, "Welcome home, son." I grabbed my backpack and entered the ground floor of the building. It was a long corridor. Our apartment is on the 8th floor. I was about to get inside the elevator when my eyes went to the numbering plate. A small, uncleared memory flashed in front of my eyes. I remembered pressing those buttons when I was a child. I loved playing inside the elevators so much. I looked around and realized this elevator had been renovated. I looked at the ceiling of the elevator. There was a small vent on it for air circulation. From that vent, the hollow elevator shaft was visible. For a moment, I felt a pair of eyes were watching me from there. The hair on the back of my neck stood up immediately. "Come on, we're here," my dad told me. I saw we were standing on the 8th floor. My dad asked, "Something wrong, Robin?" "Sorry, it's nothing. I just got distracted," I replied. While coming out of the elevator, I looked up once again, but there wasn't anything. God, this hectic journey really got to me, I said to myself. After a cool, refreshing shower, I finally managed to clear out my mind. My mom made chicken, porridge, fried mushrooms, and my favorite cheesecake for dinner that night. "It sure is good to be home, Mama," I said, with a big smile. We all sat down in the living room to chat. My dad was really funny. He started to bring all kinds of embarrassing childhood memories up. Everyone was laughing and having a good time. At around 11 p.m., we all went to bed. I was already tired and feeling very sleepy. As I laid down on my soft bed, deep sleep grabbed my eyes. At around 2 in the morning, I heard a weird sound in my room. It felt like someone was breathing heavily, sitting very close to me. I opened my eyes, and what I saw made my heart race like a wild horse. A face was leaning on me and breathing heavily. I could tell it was a little girl. Her long black hairs were floating in the air. All I could see was her wide eyes and that dark face. She was watching me while I slept all of this time. My voice got stuck. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. The girl then came closer and said, "How could you? How could you, Robbie?" I shot up from my bed, panting and gasping for air. The sunlight coming from my window made me realize that it was morning. I wiped the drops of sweat from my face and uttered to myself, "What the hell? That dream felt so real." I didn't say anything to my mom or dad about this creepy dream. I freshened up and sat for breakfast. Casually, I asked, "Hey, Mom, what did you used to call me when I was little?" My mom replied, "What kind of weird question is that, Robin? We all called you by your name." I smiled awkwardly and said, "No, I just thought if someone called me Robbie or not." But before I could finish my sentence, I saw my mom's face changing color. She froze like a statue and said, "Who told you that? Did anyone in the building call you Robbie?" I looked at her with a confused face and said, "No, but it means that someone used to call me Robbie, right?" My dad suddenly looked at my mom and said, "Don't you remember, Yasmin? I used to call him Robbie sometimes. My mom immediately smiled and said, "Oh, right. Yeah, I must just be getting old." I felt the suppressed tension in the room. I didn't know why, but I was sure my parents were hiding something from me. After finishing my breakfast, I decided to go out and roam around. I got into the lift and my eyes went towards the elevator shaft, but I didn't see anything except the hollow place this time. That day, I roamed around the town. I saw my school and visited the kids' park. So many memories filled my heart with joy. At around 7:30 p.m., I went to a local pub to chill for some time. My mom called me in between and said, "Robin, when are you coming home?" I replied, "Hey, Mom, yeah, I'm gonna be a little late tonight, but don't wait up for me. I'll just have dinner at the pub here." My mom replied, "Okay, sweetie. Well, listen, your dad and I were thinking about visiting my sister tomorrow. Your aunt is dying to meet you. We'll leave for their farmhouse tomorrow, okay?" "Seems like a plan to me," I said. I watched a football game in the pub and drank as many beers as possible. When I came home, I was stumbling. Shit, man, I really am drunk, I thought to myself. All I wanted then was to go to my room and sleep like a dead cat. I got inside the lift and pressed button 8. The lift started to go up. The number plate flashed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. I was feeling suffocated and warm, so I took off my jacket and suddenly noticed the mirror on the lift's wall. The same girl from my dream last night was standing right beside me. The scariest thing was that I looked beside me, but there was no one inside the elevator except me. My skin crawled in terror. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" The girl looked at the elevator shaft and then said in the same painful voice, "How could you, Robbie? How could you?" She then opened her black, hollow mouth, and a demonic scream numbed my ear. Suddenly, a drop of blood fell on my forehead, and as I looked up, drops of blood started to pour from the elevator shaft. The entire elevator was splattered with blood. The elevator started to go up at full speed. It passed my floor, and the numbers flashed. 8, 9, 10, 12, 13. 13th floor. I remembered. Susie. It was Susie. Oh my God. Susie and I were best friends. We used to run all over the apartment during afternoons and play together. One day, the elevator was out of order. We were playing hide and seek with the other kids in the apartment. Susie and I decided to hide above the elevator. I helped her climb up, and I went to go grab something to stand on so I could get up there as well. We had no idea that the maintenance guy was working in the basement on the elevator. As soon as he fixed it and pressed the button, the elevator went to the top floor at full speed. I remembered Susie's scream when she got crushed under the roof. All this time, she was telling me how could I leave her that day. My head started to throb in pain. I couldn't breathe. Eventually, I fainted on the floor. I was down with a high fever for 2 days. When I got a bit better, I confronted my parents. My mom cried a lot and said, "Oh, Robin, we sent you away so that you can keep this out of your vicious memory. Poor Susie." She kept on sobbing. I visited Susie's grave the other day. Her family buried her in our local graveyard and moved to Australia. Tears rolled down my cheeks. I murmured softly, "Susie, I didn't leave you that day. I'm sorry I was late. I hope you rest in peace." I'm a single mother. My boyfriend was a drug addict.
If you're like most people, you've probably at one point had the experience of your alarm clock becoming a part of your dream before waking up. Or perhaps had some other sound like the TV you left on before falling asleep influence your dreams. But what would happen if reality influenced your dreams during a nightmare? Well, it would probably only add to the horror. While all of the stories on this list are creepy, some are more unexplainable than others. Here are 5 first-hand stories of people whose nightmares have strangely read into reality. Number 5. This story was submitted to me by Earl Feinhardt. It was a long and stressful day, so falling asleep was easy. I think a dream started to fade in around halfway through the night. It wasn't a pleasant dream. I'll try to describe it the best I could. I was in the woods outside of a giant castle. Everything was black except for the night sky, which had a hint of blue. I remember this horrifying sound coming from inside the castle, as if something were calling me. It's downright disturbing to think about it even now. The sound was some kind of demonic, hellish voice, and it echoed through the woods. I somehow knew it was coming from inside the castle, and yet it sounded as if the source of the sound was a few hundred feet away from me. This was not a lucid dream. I had no conscious control over myself, so I made my way to the castle. There were no doors. It was as if the inside of this castle was also the outside. I don't know how else to describe it. The sound of the demonic voice was no doubt getting louder, and as I walked the open corridors of the castle, the halls started to become more narrow, and I felt myself banging into the walls as I dragged myself along. The sounds of the screaming were coming from beyond a door on my left. I entered, and I swear to God, there was nothing but blackness in the room, and yet I still felt myself moving closer to the sound. I banged into something, and that's when I woke up, hunched over my 4-year-old son's bed, who was crying and horrified. He had been screaming because he also had a nightmare, and I scared him even more, as he described the way I walked in and then stopped in front of his bed, slowly lowering myself closer to him. Number 4. This story was posted by a forum user named Joey Mancuso. I just want to point out before sharing my story that I am an atheist and do not believe in any kinds of miracles, gods, or anything of that sort. However, I still don't know how to explain this. I was having a really disturbing dream. It seemed to be Halloween night, and I was with my friends trick-or-treating. We hit 2 houses. The first one was normal from what I remember. When we rang the doorbell to a second house, the door opened on its own into a darkish blue living room. I stepped inside, and my friends were gone at this point. I looked around the room I was in. The door I had just entered from no longer existed. In fact, the whole room seemed to have rapidly changed appearance, a common occurrence in dreams. After exploring the house, I came to a room upstairs, even though I didn't remember climbing the stairs. On the wall I was facing was a giant framed picture, at least 10 meters long and 20 meters wide. The picture was of my 30-year-old cousin, who I hadn't seen in years. Her eyes were enlarged to an uncomfortable amount, and they followed me everywhere I went. The giant portrait suddenly cracked, and the rusty, scratchy, ear-piercing sound of the giant nails holding the portrait on the wall painfully filled my eardrums. The portrait started to fall off the wall, and I watched, completely frozen, as it fell on top of me. But before it could crush me, I was awake. It was maybe 5 in the morning. Minutes after waking up, my cell phone rang. I picked up. It was my uncle calling to tell me that my cousin had just overdosed on heroin and died. Number 3. I was having a nightmare that started off with me in my house reading a newspaper. Then the lights went out, and the dream started to focus on my trying to find out why the power was cut. The fuse box was apparently in the basement in this dream, which is, by the way, inaccurate to real life. I went down to the basement with a flashlight and opened up the fuse box. There was a sticky note inside, saying, "Go back upstairs to the red room." While still in the basement, I started to hear a moaning type sound coming from the boiler room/laundry room. My brain knew my childhood fears, and it seemed to be taking advantage of them in this nightmare. The door to the boiler room cracked open, and something poked its head out to look at me. I left the basement after seeing this, following the sticky note's orders. I went upstairs to the second floor of the house, and there was a glowing red door at the end of the hall, a door that doesn't actually exist in my real house. Now, there was a disturbing echoing sound coming from beyond the door, and as I got closer, it became more clear that it was a voice, chanting the number 314. 314. I opened the door, and there was just a chair in the room, facing the wall across from me. The room was as red as the glow that had been illuminating through the door. The voice chanting 314 was clearer now. It was an extremely creepy voice, almost feeling like it was speaking into my ear. I woke up abruptly, with my heart beating somewhat quickly. I grabbed my iPhone that was sitting on the desk next to me to check the time. It was 3:14 a.m. You may think I just saw a clock while half awake or something, but I have no digital clocks in my room. The only clock would be the one on my iPhone that was in the same position as I had left it before going to bed. To this day, I have no idea how my dream knew it was 3:14, or if there was supposed to be some kind of meaning behind it. Number 2. This one was from an Ask Reddit post. It was a night during the summer 2015. I was high out of my mind after a party. I was fortunate enough to not get caught by my parents as I walked to my room to get straight to bed. I was at the part of my high where I was just exhausted and wanted to get some sleep, and so I fell asleep in probably 10 minutes or less. Have you ever heard about that idea that smoking pot and then going to sleep high alters your dreams or gives you some kind of enhanced dreaming capabilities? Well, after this one, I won't be fighting that theory. I don't remember anything before this dream. It started out with me in the woods in the middle of the night. In real life, you would just be surrounded by trees and the sounds of night critters, nothing special. But being that this was a dream, it was much worse. There were ghostly wind sounds coming from everywhere. Instead of bug noises, there were wolf howls and sounds of footsteps coming from behind me. There was that magically horrifying feeling of a dream that you just can't describe, but it made it so much more than just being trapped in the woods. I found myself running away from the footsteps that were consistently the same distance behind me until reaching a building in the middle of the woods. Of course, I went inside and boarded the door shut with planks that seemed to have come out of nowhere. This dream seemed to have gone on forever, too long to describe it all, but to summarize, I was in that building, which turned out to be a house, and the footsteps that were following me from outside were circling the house. I tried to find a weapon, but the house was almost completely empty. Everything was black and white at this point. While sitting on a couch in the living room, one of the only pieces of furniture there was a shadow that appeared at the window, and shortly after, the figure standing outside knocked on the window. It kept knocking and knocking until I woke up, but the knocking didn't stop. I jumped out of bed when I realized someone was at my window, looking in and knocking. I squealed for my dad, and the figure at the window ran off. I'm still open to the possibility that my high hadn't completely worn off, and that it might have been a partial wake-up hallucination, but it was also so real that, at the same time, I have to believe it actually happened. The sound was real, and the figure at my window was real. My dad and I looked around the property to find no one. He told me I just had a bad dream and to go back to sleep. I hope he was right. Number 1. I was having a horrifying dream, possibly the most disturbing nightmare of my life. I was in my house, or the closest thing to my house that my dream could produce. Ironically enough, I was in bed in this dream, or at least I can only start remembering past the point of my lying in bed, and all of a sudden, the sound came from downstairs. I walked downstairs in the dark, not turning on any lights, to where I thought the sound was coming from. I was on my middle floor now. The dream was telling me to go downstairs to my laundry room, and so I did. But as I got there, expecting the noise to be louder and closer, it sounded like it was just as far as before. Now I was going upstairs to the kitchen, and it's strange, outside of every window was complete blackness, not general nighttime darkness. There was nothingness. I think all that existed in this dream was my house. Now my dream started to suggest that the banging sounds were coming from upstairs, so I went back upstairs and was eventually led to the attic door. It was surely beyond that door. I opened it. There was an old woman standing by a bunch of boxes. She was slowly but loudly slamming her hand on one of the boxes, producing an unnatural sound. I tried to quietly step back away from the attic, but the old woman turned around, opened her mouth twice as wide as anyone humanly could, reached out her arms, began to scream, and leaped toward me. That's when I woke up. I thought it was just a horrific dream, but when I heard a bang coming from downstairs, a bang similar to what I heard in my dream, I felt my heart completely drop. On my way downstairs, there was another bang. It was the front door. I got the butcher knife from my knife holder in the kitchen and crouched behind the door. I was waiting for the next time he would pound on the door and I would warn him to go away. I waited for a good minute in silence and finally decided to take a quick look through the window. There was somebody standing in my driveway. I couldn't tell if he was facing me or looking at me or not, but he was surely the one who was pounding on my door at 4 a.m. He walked away down the sidewalk moments after he must have noticed me. The pounding on my door was the kind of pounding you would expect from someone trying to break in a door, not to get a house owner's attention. I thought it was just crazy and horrifying that the pounding and banging from this potential robber or killer didn't wake me up, rather became the key point to a horrifying dream.
Guys, I'm
You know that feeling you get when you see something you shouldn't? The sinking sensation that pushes up your insides into your throat. For some, this feeling comes from walking in on their parents having sex or seeing a drug deal down in a dark alleyway. I wasn't so lucky. This all began about 7 months ago during my second year of college. I had started working as a part-time loader at a tractor supply. It was easy work, easy money, and I figured some muscle-building manual labor wouldn't hurt my chances with the ladies. Things went about as expected until Jack Stoll walked in. He was handsome, probably in his late 30s, with brown hair sprinkled with salt and pepper, and a short, well-trimmed beard. The odd thing was how well he dressed. Most men that came in were ranchers wearing dirty jeans and boots, topped off with nice-sized cowboy hats. Jack wore loafers, pressed chinos, and a solid-colored button-up shirt. He walked up to me. "Excuse me, can you point me to the pig feed?" Yes, sir, right this way." I led him around the towering columns of ranching supplies to the livestock feed. "Pig feed's right here, sir," I said, pointing towards the stack of Purina show chow. "Would you like me to help you out with these?" What the hell. I'm short on time, so the extra hand'll help." He pulled his cart up next to the bags. "How many?" I asked. "I'll start with 4. Come back for more when I need it." With that, we began loading. I hefted the first 25-pound bag up and into the cart, sending a metallic jangle echoing. "You bulking up a show pig?" "No," he said with a grunt as he bent down for another bag. "I'm fattening one up for slaughter." His words were sharp. I disregarded his tone at the time because he added, "It's so much cheaper to buy one and butcher it yourself, you know? I love myself some bacon." Bacon, my good man, is the key to life, the meat of the gods. He laughed. "Oh boy, my wife hates this stuff." He shook his head. "Hated this stuff." He paused. Unsure of how to respond, I bent for another bag. "It's probably the first time I've laughed since she passed, so thank you for that." He reached his hand out. "My name's Jack." "Alex," I said, shaking it. I left Jack at the cash register and walked outside. The sun was headed around the edge of the earth, turning the sky yellow-red. While I waited, I wondered wildly about what might have happened to Jack's wife. The rickety cart rattled out along with Jack. "My car's over there," he said, giving his unlock button a quick click. A sedan's light flashed, and we walked towards it. The front bumper was caved in on the driver's side. Not enough to inflict an occupant with more than a sore back. That ruled out death by car wreck for his wife. He opened the trunk, and we had the bags loaded in. "Thank you, Alex." "Yes, sir. Happy to help. I'm not just saying that because I work here." With another chuckle, he slammed the door and walked past me to get in his car. "I'll keep an eye out for you the next time I come in. You're good company." Jack came in regularly after that, getting more feed and occasionally throwing in stall bedding pellets. With each visit over those first 6 months, he maintained his initial politeness. But that wasn't enough to keep me from noticing the changes. Most were innocent enough. Half a shirt tail out, untrimmed beard, messy hair. One afternoon I got a good look into his eyes, and I saw 2 bottomless trenches, and the shadow of some grotesque beast that threatened to break free. Curiosity finally got the better of me. As month 7 of our odd friendship rolled around, Jack's sedan pulled into the lot as I was getting off my shift. Instead of greeting him like normal, I ducked behind a pillar to remain unseen as he walked in. I was thinking about asking him outright what was going on, but that was too forward for my tastes, and I didn't want to lose my job. I peered around to catch a glimpse at him before he walked out of sight. His gait was that of an angry zombie as he shuffled into the store. My gut told me that there was something really messed up going on. I had my theories about what it was exactly that had happened. Murder, drug money, sex trafficking all top the list. And what of his wife? This was a bad idea, but I was already walking to my car to get into place for my half-baked scheme. I pulled into my hiding spot and waited. After 10 minutes, he walked out with his customary basket full of feed. His damn eyes. It was as if what they had witnessed was so horrific, they only felt safe tucking into the shadows of the sunken sockets. He shrugged to heave bags into his car. Instead of ditching the basket in the lot like most of the jerks that came in, he walked it back up to the store. He shuffled back to his car, and left. I tailed him like a practiced stalker, weaving through town, heading towards a truth I wasn't sure I wanted to know. But something pushed me on. Jack and I had grown close, sharing tidbits of our lives and the time it took us to get out to his car and load up. He knew about my parents, my girlfriend, my thoughts on politics, and even my dog's name. Not even my coworkers knew Ralphie's name. And he shared plenty of his life with me. He never mentioned his wife again, but he shared other things. His brother's a cop in town, has been for 20 years. His dad lives up north in Maine with his stepmom. His mom passed away 15 years ago after a stroke. We'd become unconventional friends, but friends nonetheless. And I knew that Jack was a good guy. This realization hit me as we passed city limits, and I resolved to see this through for Jack. To help him out, if he was in some kind of trouble. Houses got further apart as we got further from the city, until there was nothing but acres of farmland. It was late afternoon when Jack turned down a dirt road. I drove past the turnoff and doubled back after a few seconds. I could make out his dust trail in the distance. I took it slow so I didn't create my own and followed. In the distance, his dust lingered in place and dissipated. He'd finally stopped. I could make out the tip of a barn. I parked my car down a side road next to a wall of corn stalks and a lone tree a half-mile from where he stopped. As I walked towards the main road, I looked back to see how visible my car was. My little Toyota was forest green and blended well enough with its surroundings. Like gossiping snakes, the corn stalks hissed in the wind as I walked down the main dirt road towards the barn. I was a quarter mile from it when the dirt cloud kicked up again. Oh, shit! I drove into the corn as Jack rounded the corner. He sped past, making the stalks dance around me, and as they settled back into their normal movements, I strained my ears for an abrupt stop signaling the discovery of my car. Just the sound of an engine getting further, and whispers from the corn. When Jack sounded far enough away, I stepped back out into the road. The tip of the barn slowly grew before me. It was like the ones that you'd see in the picture books. Red paint and all. But the paint was cracked and flaked, and the wood it covered was dilapidated. Planks were missing every few feet, making the barn look like the skeleton of a large, boxy beast. The farmland around the barn mirrored it. What was organized rows of crops morphed into scattered cornstalks, weed, mesquite bushes, untended wasteland. The smell of shit and something else I couldn't quite place slapped me in the face about 20 feet from the barn. I fought the urge to throw up, but I pushed on. If I found a dead body in there, do I call the police? Jack's brother? It was even worse by the door. But my nose ignored it when my ears caught the sound of a pig. It was faint, but unmistakable nasal grunts. Misplaced relief and courage flooded me. It's only a pig, I thought. I'll drop in, have a quick look at it, and leave. Simple as that. I slid the door aside and sidled in, my hand clamping my nose shut. The grunt echoed around the room, but I couldn't make anything out. Slats of light made it through the cracked windows and missing boards. Other than that, the room was dark. My ears placed the pig at the back of the barn, probably with a pen, with bedding, and a trough, based on what Jack was buying of the tractor supply. I moved into the barn's belly, pulling my phone out for extra light. I noticed a wet sound along with the pig's grunts and its heavy breaths. It must have been eating and doing so with vigor. I guess Jack really only feeds it a few times a week. My phone light cast shadows, making the rusty tools and broken benches in the barn creepier than necessary. And was that a moan, along with the sound of slop? No, surely not. I made out the pen. Light pushed through the slats and landed on a pink, hairy, heaving mass, consumed by the meal before it. My breath quickened and my body shook. Had that been a human leg attached to that pig? No. The pig stopped feeding. All was quiet, but the thump of my heart in my ears and the pig's heavy breathing. More? It asked with longing. Through mud and feces, it squelched towards me. A man with long, matted hair peeked at me through the sty's slats. My phone's light danced in his dilated eyes. You're not him. More food. All I could get out was, no, what? Seeing I didn't have food with me, he crawled back to his slop. Light, shaking, I willed my legs forward. In the sty, on hands and knees, hunched over a short trough, was a naked, morbidly obese man. His eyes billowed around him in an asymmetrical mass, covered in a mixture of bodily discharge and mud. I could taste his stench. I welcomed the vomit that came, anything to clean my mouth, and before I had time to plan out my next steps, a phone that wasn't mine vibrated and dinged. It was on a warped table near the front door of the barn. The light it cast crept up the wall. Oh no. Jack walked in with his right hand on his smartwatch. He was pinging the phone he left behind. Fear planted me. I prayed he would be like the T-Rex in Jurassic Park. It couldn't see you if you don't move. He gasped when he saw me. Alex? What are you doing here? He sounded more hurt than angry. Shouldn't I be asking you that question? I tried to project as much outrage as I could muster, but with my nose still pinched, I sounded like a kid show character. A sloshing sound came towards us. The man in the sty crawled up to the slats and snorted, More food? Jack turned to the man. No, you piece of shit! Get back to the slop I just gave you! His voice had mutated into an animal snarl. I figured this would have been the best time to make it towards a thin opening I noticed in the barn wall. If I squeezed through, I might make it out. I psyched myself up for a millisecond, then rushed towards it. Whoa! Jack called. You'll hurt yourself if you go that way! His words only half registered at the time. I got to the opening and wormed my way out, shoulder first. Jack thumped at me from behind. The image of him grabbing my leg, pulling me in, and chaining me next to the man had me clawing with all of my strength. Shirt tearing and skin ripping, I pushed outside. I breathed fresh air, thankful to be out there. Ignoring the pain, I ran towards my car. I caught the faint sound of Jack's yells, and then his engine starting. I glanced over my shoulder at the car, racing down the road. When I pushed into the corn, visibility dropped to nothing. Nothing but wavy green stalks. I sprinted, Making a mental note to exercise more often, my calves were clenched fists at that point. It also didn't help that the stalks whipped my face and arms as I barreled through. The leaves cut like paper, leaving stinging slices all over. On a good day, a half mile would take me 5 or 6 minutes, but this wasn't a good day. It might have been my last day if Jack caught me. I strained to hear over the wind, my heavy breaths and the thuds of my feet. But I couldn't hear Jack's car. That didn't mean much with the extra noise, but maybe I would be okay. Maybe Jack cut his losses and made a break. I slowed to a brisk walk when I could see the tree where I had parked my car. Still, no engine hum or tire crunch. And thank God I'm home free. I was thinking of my first steps when I pushed through the edge of the farmland. Jack was sitting on the head of my car, with his right hand cradling his forehead. He looked up when he heard me. Alex, don't run. Please, you need to let me explain myself. What you saw back there, he's a bad man. I weighed my options. Try to take Jack head on. Maybe a break for my car. Steal his? I won't stop you if you want to go. This, he gestured to the barn, is over. I'm done. I ran past, out of his reach to be safe, and got into my car. He pushed off the hood and stepped aside. Quiet consumed me after I slammed the door. The type of quiet that hurts your ears. But why should I have to worry about this? I'll leave it to the professionals. I pulled away when Jack put his hands up and signaled for me to roll my window down. I felt braver in my car, so I complied. I'd run that sick freak over if I had to, and Jack walked up to my window. I don't expect you to do anything but call the police, but please, hear me out. Tears welled up. He locked his eyes on mine. Okay. My foot twitched on the brake, ready for action. You're a good man, Alex. He nodded and wore a half smile that quickly faded. That thing in there, his name's Richie Snyder. 3 years ago, that piece of shit strangled my wife, Stacy, while she was out on a jog. My blood cooled. He didn't kill her that night, though she grew to wish that he had. After it happened, she walked in, hair disheveled, tank top torn, hanging off her shoulder. Her hand pulled her waistband up. She looked dazed, like she had solved some unanswerable equation. "You raped me," she said. "We did everything right. We reported to the police, to the kit, gave a description, and they caught the fucker." That night was the first night since it happened that she could sleep. As hard as it was, she gave her testimony at the trial. We were only there that one day. She said it felt so good to look that pig in the face, knowing he would go away for good. But Richard had information, which was worth more to the county than putting him away. He was involved with a local drug ring, and he was promised that if he snitched, his sentence would be lessened to 3 months of jail time. Fucking community service. Jack's body shook, and tears slid over his wrinkles. Up close, he looked 10 years older than when I had met him a few months ago. I put the car in park and took my foot off the brake. God, Jack, I'm not finished. Stace was crushed, shoved back into the mental cage he'd just escaped, except this one was reinforced. More fear, more anger, more pain. In her mind, what other choice did she have? The day... His throat hitched. The day after he got out, I found her body. Tears streamed. She sliced her wrists in the bathtub. When I think back to when I walked in, before the confusion, the call to 911, seeing her body rolled out of the house, I remember for a moment thinking she was asleep. Thinking all that red might be from a bath bomb. It had been months since she looked so peaceful. I hated myself for that, but it brought me maybe peace. No, not peace. Purpose. I tailed him for weeks after he got out of jail, followed him through his community service. This was before I had any kind of plan. I thought about our last few months together, and the last time she was really herself was right before the sentencing. She looked the pig in the face, and that's when it all clicked. He's a fucking pig. So why not help him live and die like one? My head swirled with questions, but within the swirling was a wisp of understanding. I didn't know what I would do in his shoes, but I surely wouldn't do nothing. So you kidnapped this Richie guy. You threw him in your barn and what? Fed him pig feed? I didn't see any chains or bindings. Why didn't he leave? The barn isn't mine. Friends of friends own the land, offered the old thing up to me, no questions asked. You'd be surprised how willing people are to avoid you after your wife commits. Jack trailed off and checked out for a second. Anyway, as for how I kept him there, I had him chained in the sty at first. But he still had some fight in him. He's broken now, of course, physically and mentally. When I dumped the feed in front of him, he wouldn't touch it. But he got hungry eventually, with all that nutritious, crunchy chow right there waiting. His weeping and wailing were sweet music as he crunched through that first bag. But I needed a way to get him hooked. Make him long for it. Do you remember me talking about my brother Tom? I nodded. He asked to be told as little as possible. Plausible deniability and all that, but he stole some bricks from the PD evidence room. Got me some cocaine to add to the mix. I still have a few bricks of it hidden in the barn. Once I threw that in, things got easier. Couldn't get enough of the stuff. Water, feed, cocaine was all it took. Perfect slop. Little piggy got fatter. Any moment I expected him to croak from a heart attack, but he wouldn't die. After all that, why not kill him yourself? I refused to kill him outright. But I want him to suffer. And he's done that. But like I said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I miss being able to sleep. I miss not being ruled by spite. I miss my wife. I'm done. Done as in... I didn't want to say it, but Jack understood. Yeah, I'm ready to meet Stacy again. What do you tell someone who's been through what he's been through? Done the things he's done. Don't die, you have so much to live for. And if he continued, would he be any less of an animal than Richie? I wanted to tell him not to go through with it, to think of his dad, of his brother, the life that he might have if he put this behind him, but I didn't. I wish you wouldn't, Jack, but I don't think I can change your mind, can I? No, but thank you for not running, to hearing me out. To my surprise, I got out of my car and embraced him. He heaved silent sobs into my shoulder. Then he backed up and he grabbed both my shoulders. Thankful to have met you, Alex. Thankful for our friendship, however short. A bright spot in the darkness. It was night when I turned back onto the highway. My hands shook as I dialed 911. One ring. I needed to tell someone, right? 2 rings. Reggie Snyder. He's still in that barn. 3. I can't just leave him in there, can I? 911 operator. Where are you calling from? I hung up. They called back 10 seconds later, telling me he had just received an emergency call from my number. No emergency. At least for now. Sorry about that. I was resetting my iPhone. I triggered the emergency call function. Sir, you sound nervous. If you're in danger, stay on the line and we will... No, I'm great. That was enough for the operator, who quickly clicked off. My only company on the drive back to my dorm from that point on was the whir of tire and asphalt. I didn't know until later why I avoided the police. I felt like a squirrel crossing the road about to be pancaked by a car. I mean, in that scenario, the squirrel has 2 options. First, the one most future squirrel cakes choose, stopping, thinking, hopping back from where it came. Second, pushing onward to the other side of the street. I wasn't sure which one I'd chose. I towed my torn and tired body up the stairs to my dorm. Thankfully, my roommate was out. I grabbed leftovers from the fridge, slunk into my bed. I put a Netflix show on to quiet my questioning inner voice and ate. I fell asleep with the leftovers on my chest and stepped back into the pigsty. "Any food for Piggy?" he called. Startled awake, I checked my phone. 1 a.m. I spent the rest of the night corroborating Jack's story through news articles and court police records. Everything fell into place. I even found Richie's mugshot. Even thinner and cleaner. He looked like a pig. I put my phone on the charger after that and played my PlayStation 4 until I had to leave for work at 7:30. Every time I passed the Purina Show Chow in the store, my insides twitched. But I pushed the feeling aside. And I kept working. I was pretty messed up the entire week. Lots of lost sleep. Lots of wondering if I said the right things or made the right choices. A week after, I knew which one of the squirrels I was. When my shift ended at 4, I made some purchases. A Moldex 2400 respirator, PVC-coated gloves and boots, and 4 bags of Purina Show Chow to finish Jack's work. Hey there kids, it's me, Mr. Creepypasta, and I just wanted to tell you thank you so much for watching tonight's video, or listening to tonight's episode of the podcast. It really helps me out whenever you guys do things like listen, or...
The estimated
Not a single piece of furniture, except for a single When I was 22, I got a job in New York City. Living in Jersey, however, there was no way I'd be able to do that commute daily, so moving was a necessity. Only thing, I didn't have a lot of money yet, so when I saw an ad on Craigslist for an available bedroom in an apartment in the Hell's Kitchen area for a really low price, I jumped on it. I took a ride to the city the next day to view the apartment, and the landlord gave me a quick tour of the place. The landlord himself seemed a bit socially awkward, but that didn't really matter at all. The place did come with a catch. I'd have a roommate. The landlord said he's a very quiet, to-himself kind of person, which he said was good. My roommate's name would be Bren. The landlord knocked on Bren's door, asking if he'd like to come out and say hello. Bren didn't even answer. The landlord suggested he might be taking a nap. So we moved on to talking in the living room, where I said I was interested in renting. I signed an application, and the next day, the landlord called and offered me the room. So I moved in the next week. My dad helped me unload all my furniture into my little room. Something odd to note was that never once did this Bren character come out during all this commotion to at least say hi. He was definitely home. We heard him moving around in his room. I came to the early realization that he probably wasn't going to be friendly at all. When we finished unloading the van, my dad left and I was alone, officially moved out. I sat in my bed and started watching Netflix on my laptop. Then I heard the door to Bren's room open and close. This seemed like my chance to go out and say hi. It was his first time leaving his room. I got out of my bed, but before I could even get to my bedroom door, the front door to the apartment slammed shut. I stepped outside to the living room, and no one was there. I didn't know what the deal with this Bren guy was, but surely he had to know we'd have to meet eventually. I went back to my room, ate a bowl of ramen, and went to sleep. I woke up when I heard the front door to the apartment close again. Then footsteps followed. The footsteps on the creaky wood floor made their way to the outside of my door, then stopped. I sat up and looked at the crack below the door. The outlines of feet could be seen through the light creeping in under the door. Why was he just standing out there like a creep? Of course I didn't say anything, I just waited for him to walk away. I didn't have my door locked, and I was low-key terrified of him entering my room. But thankfully, he walked away from my door and back to his room, and I heard him shut his door. I tried to go to sleep, but all night all I heard were thumps coming from his room. I had no idea what he could possibly be doing. I was tempted to go knock on his door and tell him to keep it down, but I hadn't even met the guy yet, so I had to deal with it. Eventually I fell asleep, and when I woke up in the morning, it seemed Bren was out already, maybe at work, I didn't know at the time. I spent most of that day shopping for groceries and basic apartment necessities. When I got back, I dropped all the bags on the couch in the living room to give myself a rest. I cooked dinner, watched some Netflix on the couch. All the while, Bren never came home. I did a quick run to the nearby 7-Eleven to get toothpaste, and when I got back, I noticed Bren's door was cracked open and the light was on. So I figured this was it, the moment for me to say hello. I went to his door, knocked lightly twice, then pushed the door open. What I found in there was shocking, or maybe I should say what I didn't find in there. The room was completely empty. Not a single piece of furniture, except for a single chair sitting in the corner of the room, a kind of chair you'd find in a high school classroom. My heart suddenly started racing and I started to shake. I turned off the light in that room and shut the door. Could this Bren person have been in the process of moving out? I went to my room, locked the door, and sat on my bed, suddenly getting a really bad headache. I took out my phone and decided to call the landlord to ask him what the hell was going on. After dialing his number, I put the phone to my ear and suddenly heard a loud ringing sound coming from my closet. I felt like my heart, which was already racing, was now in my stomach. The phone rang twice, then went to voicemail. I got out from the bed, ready to open the closet, but I stopped and realized that given that the phone rang twice, that means he had his phone and he declined the call. I had the sick realization that the landlord was likely in my closet, and there never even was a Bren. I ran to the bathroom, locked myself in, and called the cops. They got to the apartment shortly and searched the whole apartment with me. Sure enough, we found the landlord hiding under my bed. I tried pressing charges for trespassing, trying to get myself out of the lease, but it turned out there never even was a lease. The dude wasn't even an actual landlord. He didn't even own the apartment. I didn't get the rest of the story, like how he got the keys in the first place. I had my dad come the next day to help me move all my stuff back home. I found another apartment the next week, and it was a huge hassle going through the whole moving process again. I knew from the start the so-called landlord gave off bad vibes, but who would have ever imagined the events that were about to take place? There was an ad on Zillow for a shared apartment near the chicken farm I worked at. I moved in because it was convenient and already furnished. I just dropped off my clothes and a mini dresser, and I already had a bed to sleep in the spare room. The man who was renting the room out to me was old. He was like 70 or something, and his name was Ben. It was a non-contractual agreement, meaning I'd pay him by the week, but he was more or less still a roommate. He was very old-fashioned, and that included everything in the house. I've never exactly come from a wealthy family, so trust me when I say this was a steal for me. One night after getting home from a long day of work, I collapsed into bed and fell asleep like a baby. But suddenly, I awoke to the bedroom door opening. Light poured into the room from the hallway, and standing in the doorway was the old man, Ben, with his hand on the doorknob. He said in his deep, hoarse voice, "Stay out of the basement." He said he knew I went down there. I defended myself and assured him I didn't, because I actually didn't. He shut the door, and I heard him walk downstairs. I sat there thinking this guy must be unstable or something. The next day, I was off from work. Ben took his old jalopy down the road. I'm guessing to the store. While I was alone, I stared at the basement door. I knew it was the basement door because I'd seen him go down there before. I went to open it just to peek downstairs, but obviously it was pitch black down there. I would have never been compelled to go down there if it weren't for his bizarre remark about not going down there. But I figured he wasn't going to be home anytime soon, so I continued down. I found the light switch at the bottom step for some reason. It was for the most part a normal basement so far, but there was a door in the corner. Behind that door was something unimaginable. The door was very hard to open because there was some rubber concealer under the door. I'm guessing to keep that awful smell out of the rest of the basement and house. The inside of this little room was a nightmare. Bloodstains on the concrete floor, black bags stacked in the corner of the room, stretched long enough to be carrying bodies or body parts. And the smell of rotting life. I had to refrain from puking right there. I noticed a camera hung in the top right corner of the room, aimed down at some workbench. I took a quick picture of the room and hurried out of there. I went up to the spare bedroom, packed all of my clothes in a garbage bag, and heard the front door slam shut downstairs. He was back. I played it cool and greeted him from the upstairs hallway. He didn't respond. I heard him open the basement door and stomp downstairs. I saw that as my cue to sprint to my car. I made it to my car and without looking back, drove away from there. I drove 15 miles back to my brother's farm and showed him the picture. He said I was an idiot for not calling the sheriff sooner. So I called 911 and told them to bring a search warrant to Ben's address and check the basement before he could clear it out. I made it clear I was simply his temporary roommate or tenant living with him and came across it. A few hours later, someone from the sheriff's department came to my brother's farm asking for my ID and some other information. I complied with them. They gave me the relieving news that Ben had been arrested. He was in the process of clearing any evidence from his basement, but he wasn't quick enough. The deputies didn't go into much detail about what exactly they found in those bags or anything else, but I don't think they were allowed to. They thanked me and went on their way. My brother let me stay with him for a few weeks, till I was ready to get back out there and find another apartment. I'm not sure how many of you went to college, but for those of you who did, you most likely remember that feeling of walking into your dorm for the first time, meeting your roommate, the person you're supposed to ideally be friends with for the next 4 years. I certainly remember mine. I walked into my dorm for the first time, and there was my roommate. He had fair skin, black hair, glasses, and a slightly feminine tone in his voice. There was nothing wrong with any of that, but to me, he just immediately struck me as the gaming type, which was not exactly someone who I was going to vibe with easily. From the moment I shook his hand and he gave me a dead fish handshake, I was a little put off. I'll call him John for the purpose of this story. I left the room to go say hi to the other kids on the floor and meet as many people as possible. I instantly vibed with some of the other kids more than I did with John. Anyway, that first night consisted of a lot of unpacking and hanging around in the room. So I did try to get to know John a little bit. It wasn't that he was a mean person, it was just he didn't seem to really know how to converse. I would ask him questions about himself, and he'd give me one-word responses, or responses that barely even made sense. He even went to bed really early, shutting off his lamp at like 10 o'clock. No one had classes the next day, so I just found it odd. I put headphones in and watched videos on my phone until around 12. Then I went to sleep. The next morning, a few of the guys on my floor and I went to the dining hall together. When I got back to my room, I noticed my duffel bag was moved. I looked at John, who was sitting on his bed. Then I went to go through my bag to see if anything was missing. I couldn't find what it was, but my bag just seemed lighter. I straight up accused John of going through my bag, and he denied it with a very aggressive tone. What could I do, though? I didn't have cameras in the room, so I couldn't prove it. The next night, I tried inviting John out with me and a couple of the other kids from the floor. He didn't want to go, claiming he was trying to stay on top of his work as soon as possible. So I went out, and when I got back, John was fast asleep. It was kind of late, so I just went straight to bed too. It started to rain pretty heavy outside. A storm was in the forecast. I woke up in the middle of the night hearing thunder crashing. I was too comfortable and lazy to roll over and look outside, but even with my eyes closed, I was noticing the constant flashing from the lightning. If anything, it actually helped put me back to sleep. The next morning, I woke up, and my backpack was open and moved. I didn't accuse John this time. I decided I was going to stay up that night and wait, listen to what he was doing. So, after a long rainy day, night came, as did the time for me to hit the hay. I stayed on my phone for a long time, listening to the rain outside the window. Around 1 or 2 a.m., I flipped on my side and pretended to be asleep. I did this for a long time, and eventually I started noticing the flashes again. 2 or 3, actually. I turned to my other side and saw John sitting upright in his bed. I only caught a glimpse of him quickly putting down his arms as I flipped over. Suddenly all those flashes made sense. It wasn't lightning. It was him taking pictures of me. I played dumb and said, "What are you doing?" He stuttered and said he couldn't sleep. The next day I told the other kids on the floor about it and how weird John was overall. They said I should request a room change. I agreed with them. At whatever point I went back to the room, John was actually gone for once. I couldn't believe it. His laptop was also on his bed with the lid cracked open. I had to snoop. I was too curious. I opened the laptop, and I was on John's desktop, which was littered full of folders, programs, and images. It was the messiest desktop I've ever seen. I started opening the random pictures on his desktop. Most of them were weird, but then I got to the disturbing ones. Pictures of me. Upon opening one of them, I realized it was a picture of me in bed, taken with an iPhone with the flash. He had stored all the pictures he'd taken of me on his computer. He even had pictures of my duffel bag and the inside of my backpack. I took a video of the laptop screen, then deleted every picture I could find from his computer and closed his laptop. I went straight to the hall that dealt with dorm life and showed them the video. I requested a new roommate immediately. I don't know how John was disciplined by the school, but I was going to be given a new room across campus the next day. However, on my last night with John, I couldn't sleep at all. I heard the springs under his mattress kinking as he got up from his bed at some odd hour in the night. Then, silence. Silence until I heard a short, quiet exhale come from right above my bed. He was standing over my bed, I just knew it. But I was just simply too afraid to turn around. Less than a minute later, I heard the springs under his mattress again, and the rest of the night was silence. I was out first thing in the morning.